I grew up in a small village in the southern part of Africa, in Zimbabwe. And I was raised by my gogo, my grandmother. We lived off our land. We grew an abundance of crops. We raised livestock, cows and goats and chickens. And it was just such a lovely childhood because we always knew where our food was going to come from. We had a garden behind our hut where we grew tomatoes and vegetables, and it was just such a great way of being able to eat the freshest of all vegetables and fruits.
We can retake, stop, anything that you're not comfortable with.
Okay. My name is Elizabeth Nyamayaro, and this is Better Food, Better World, a podcast about our relationship with food, how it reaches us, our choices, and the world it lives in, which we also call food systems. I want to share with you what food systems are and how our everyday actions, the food on our plates, have an impact on global issues such as migration, labor exploitation, hunger, and of course the destruction of rivers and forests. I was in charge of the goats. At the age of 5, my gogo taught me about work ethics. She taught me what it means to work hard. And I became in charge of the goats. We had 11 goats. And every single morning, I would get up at 5 o'clock and wrangle the goats to the nearest bush, where I would tie each of the goats onto the trees so that they wouldn't wander off and eat our crops. And it was a lot of work. Goats are some of the most stubborn animals you can come across. It was the most difficult work that I've ever done. But it was also so rewarding, right? This idea that you could accomplish something even as a young child. It also is one of my fondest memories because it was also the one time that I had time just for myself. And after I wrangled the goats, I would be out of breath and I would stop. And that's what my gogo taught me. She taught me that. She also taught me the importance of working hard. She taught me the importance of food, right? And this idea that we have to treat food almost as the greatest asset that we have. Because if we're hungry, we're not able to do so many things in our community. We're not able to be productive in our community. You also can't be healthy if you're hungry, which is why I think it should be a human right. It's not a luxury to be able to eat well because so much of our health, of our well-being, of our economies depend on our ability to have nutritious food. And Gogo taught me that, but she also taught me about gratitude and about what it means to treat others with kindness. And I'm so grateful for all these teachings because it's also what inspires me to do this work as a humanitarian, because I recognize that, as Gogo taught me, when we uplift others, we in turn uplift ourselves. And a lot of that is needed in our world today. We have to find ways to uplift others. Better Food, Better World is led by the United Nations World Food Programme. And in recognition of our work in building pathways to peace and stability, the World Food Programme was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2020. I'm excited to have you on this journey with me as we explore links between our food systems, climate change, and conflict. And I also want to share with you some amazing stories of hope and healing that I am sure are going to inspire you to make different choices. We'll be hearing from change makers and innovators who I hope can motivate you to make a difference.
My mother, Grandma must have spent her days watching and communicating with the land to know particular farming techniques were required on different pieces of land.
I'm speaking today to a Kenyan who has dedicated his life to fixing food systems, a UK chef who is furious and passionate about how much food we waste, and a Zimbabwean food activist who uses poetry to talk about food. But first, let me tell you a little about my own journey with food growing up. what was also remarkable about my community is that we pretty much did everything together. And one of the things that brought us together as a community was food. We gathered around food during ceremonial moments, whether it was celebrating a birth in our community or whether it was celebrating a good harvest. But we also gathered around food during times of mourning. And my gogo taught me from a very young age just how important food was. In fact, she said that, food was life. It was also the way through which we expressed love to each other in our village. It was also a way to heal ourselves. And so there was such an importance placed on food. And even though from a young age I didn't understand this terminology of food systems, which is literally the way that food travels from our farms to our tables and our kitchens, I at least knew where my food was coming from. But sadly, when I turned 8, our world got completely turned upside down. A severe drought hit my village, and suddenly the rain stopped coming. And my country was experiencing some of the early shocks of climate change. We suddenly had nothing to eat or drink. In fact, all our crops perished, our rivers dried up, and our livestock died. And it was such a devastating moment for my community. And I remember one day I hadn't eaten for a few days. And I literally collapsed onto the ground. And in my young mind, I thought I was going to die, right? I had this just incredible hunger pains. I was going in and out of consciousness. My gogo was away during that moment, and so she wasn't able to save me. I don't know if one could fully describe what it means to be hungry, because it's a feeling that I don't think words are sufficient to explain it. But I remember being hungry at the age of 8. And I think also what made it more devastating is I had lived with abundance, right? I never wanted for anything prior to the drought hitting my village. And so I knew what it means to have access to food, to have food security, to have a full belly, to be able to just go behind our hut and pluck a ripe mango from the tree, to go and pluck a ripe tomato, from our garden and eat it, to be able to just, have anything that I wanted, have milk, just the most creamiest of all milk from our cows and from our goats. And so to suddenly not have anything, to have your stomach completely empty, it's harrowing. It's harrowing because you feel empty, you feel hopeless. The hunger pains cut through you like tiny razors, cutting your intestines open. You can't breathe because it hurts to breathe. Because with every breath you try and take, it's like being stabbed, I wouldn't wish hunger on anyone. I wouldn't. But then thankfully, an incredible thing happened to me. A fellow African who was a humanitarian with the United Nations found me, and she gave me a bowl of porridge that literally saved my life. And it just placed the importance, this understanding of what food can be. I realized it was also life-saving, and that bowl of porridge not only saved my life, but it also ended up defining my life purpose. Because when I was able to learn and find out that this woman who had saved my life worked for the United Nations, I immediately decided that's who I wanted to be. I too wanted to be just like her, so that maybe one day I can save the lives of others in a similar way that my life had been saved. And I'm so grateful for that moment, one of those moments that could have really damaged most people, and the trauma of it all in my case, it ended up really giving my life purpose. And so I'm incredibly excited and honored to be working with the United Nations World Food Program and hosting this podcast in order to share with you some of my own personal experience with food, but also my journey in that relationship and how now through my work, I might now be able to also make sure that no child or any family ever has to go through what I went through. So this is who I am, and I welcome you to be part of this journey as we together discover what is wrong, what is flawed, what needs to change with our food system to make sure that people and communities who need access to food have access to food, because we actually do grow enough food to feed everyone. There's something broken with our food systems. The fact that not everyone is able to have the same access to food doesn't seem right. Right now, 811 million people go to bed hungry every single night. And yet, here's the crazy thing. We waste enough food every single year to feed 2 billion people. So I refuse to believe that we cannot solve global hunger. We just have to find a new way of doing so. And I believe that one of those ways requires us working together as a collective, right? So, if it's a collective issue, well, it requires all of us to work together because we are all part of the problem in the first place. Whether it's the way that we waste food in our own homes, the way that we pay no attention to how much carbon footprint we're creating. By the way, just adding on to the problem of climate change, if we are all part of the problem, then, come on, we all have to be part of the solution. And I think we can achieve that as a collective.
Okay, it's recording.
Do you have headphones for the computer?
If I use headphones, which I can, I should have echo cancellation clicked or unclicked?
Unclicked.
Okay, let me get some headphones then.
This is Stephen Were Amamo. He's the father of food systems.
Well, calling me the father of food systems at WFP is stretching it a bit, but I certainly have a part of the effort to solidify and embed the food system perspective at WFP.
A modest man, Were's official title is Country Director and Representative of the World Food Program in Ethiopia. We managed to speak to him between his hectic schedule, managing one of the biggest humanitarian crises in Tigray, where his team is making sure food assistance reaches millions. He has worked most of his life on food systems.
For me, the food system is, you can think of it as an interlocking network of relationships that cover the entire range of functions and activities involved in producing, processing, marketing, consuming, and disposing of goods that originate in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries.
So basically, a food system encompasses all of the parts and people it took to get that food on your plate.
Food system, on reflection, has been part of my life for a long time.
Were grew up in Kenya, and his family had and still has a farm.
Was always at the core of our family. And so there was always something from the farm at the dinner table or breakfast table. The farm was a mixed farm in that there was crops and livestock. So there was sugarcane, maize, sorghum at times, different kinds of livestock, poultry, and so on. My late father was a trained agriculturalist, so his view of the world was very much one of a farmer. His eye was always looking out for things related to agriculture and the food system. Food and agriculture was always high in my imagination. Just some things about agriculture came to really appreciate this idea of a freshly plowed field is still one of my favorite sights, or a field with, young shoots of emerging plants. It's like magic. I love that sight. So, farming and agriculture and the food system has always been part of our lives, both as a source of livelihood, because this is what educated all of us, our farm, but also as a source of meals and a worldview.
So Were's family farm is just one of the many players in a food system.
It's really important to appreciate that these functions in a food system are impacted by different contextual factors. Security is fundamental. Political systems, the policy framework, and of course, very, very importantly, climate and environment. All of these have impacted the food system by changing or affecting the cost and the efficacy of performing these different functions. So to me, that's kind of the way that I think of it, as a set of functions that have to be undertaken as well as possible, and they're all interrelated. They're also impacted by these big forces that change the degree to which they can be undertaken effectively. And why are they important now? I think it's because they're so fundamental to social cohesion, economic prosperity, growth and inclusion, equity of an economy, and of course the political systems. Without a well-functioning food system, you really can't deliver on all of these bigger societal objectives. So to me, that's why we're talking about it now. And climate action, climate issues, the climate change that we're trying to address as a global community. Again, so many opportunities and problems reside within the food system that give us greater or lesser scope to address climate issues.
If food systems are so tied to social cohesion, economic prosperity, and functioning political systems, then what happens if food systems are broken? I'll just say pickle pepper, pickle pepper.
You're not popping. It's fabulous.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure that Chef Arthur Potts Dawson serves pickled peppers at his award-winning restaurants in London, but he does promise to put on his plate food that is sustainable. Thank you. And we're going to jump right into it, actually.
Yeah, hi, Elizabeth. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for letting me come and talk and share some stories, and hopefully we can open up the dialogue to some really interesting points and discussions.
Yeah. I have a light-hearted question for you, and I think it's going to be difficult because you're a chef. What is your favorite meal? What is like your comfort, maybe your comfort food, like the thing that you go back to that either connects it to your childhood or a fond memory?
Elizabeth, I know you want a hugely romantic meal, and I know that you want me to give you a story, and I have been asked this question quite a lot, but my simplest answer has been bread and butter. Because bread for me is the identity of a culture, is the way that you grow in the soil and how the wheat grows and how it's harvested and how it's milled and how you keep the whole grain and you grind it and you mix it with the water and the yeast and you let it, it leavens, it rises. And it's fresh and it smells, and it's when it's still warm. And then, of course, you've got the connection to the butter, which has come from the land and the grass and the animal, and it's been milked and it's been, and it's gone through this process of love. And so if you can give me a beautiful, warm loaf of bread and a fresh, cold, salted butter, and, if I want to add absolute decadence, I'll put some honey on top. So bread and butter and honey. And, I think that those three items are probably founded in antiquity. For me, you can give me truffles and seafood and raspberries and stuff, but you know what? Give me some bread and butter, and I'm very happy.
Just bread and butter. It sounds yummy. Arthur is an advocate for sustainable food production and often speaks on issues relating to global hunger in his role supporting the UN World Food Programme.
I've been talking about food waste for over 15 years, and yet it's only really now becoming a story. And 15 years ago, I was banging my pots and pans together saying, listen up, we can't throw food away. It's not working as a system.
Lots of people in the developing world don't realize that their everyday actions and their consumer habits and their food waste actually has an impact on the lives of others, especially in the developing world. I think what you're doing is really, really powerful. I think we need more of this kind of education and awareness, and work still remains, right?
Especially when it comes to international trade. There's no way we should buy a French bean from Zimbabwe and not eat it when it arrives on our plate. I mean, food waste is a terrible crime, and one that should be ultimately punished.
You know, I actually think that once you become aware of these things, it's very difficult to do anything else other than be conscious of where your food is coming from. I remember, so I grew up in Zimbabwe, and we're a landlocked country. So we didn't have lots of fish. And when I moved to the UK, one of the things that I fell in love with was British fish and chips. And I didn't have enough money to purchase it because I was a struggling student at some point. And I actually taught myself how to make it. But then I watched a documentary a few years later, and it was talking about the overfishing in the EU states and how actually most of the countries were going, as you said previously, were going to Senegal and taking the fish away from these communities who have literally lived for centuries of fishing, not only as a source of food, but also as part of their livelihood. And now they have no protein, which is causing more malnutrition to their children. They can't send their kids to school because they can't make money from the fish because it's all been overfished. And it was such a weird thing, Arthur, because I remember thinking, oh my God, I probably took away life-saving fish from an African community that needed it more than I needed it. Because for me, it was just it's a treat. You know, fish and chips it's just a treat that you have. You know, I think consumers are starting to get it.
There is no such thing as cheap food. The more mass-produced a product is, the more monocrop style it's grown, wheat, corn, rice, it tends to impact the environment very negatively. So the cheaper you make it, maybe we're not paying as humans the actual financial cost, but the planet is paying the environmental cost. So a restaurant that teaches and narrates and educates at the same time as feeding is an essential part of our food system. So much of the time, restaurants take the responsibility away from the consumer to say, here's your plate of food. That's what I suggest you eat because this is my menu. You cannot challenge me on the way I do this because you think my food is delicious. But you see, the consumer needs to be given as much information as possible across the whole spectrum of food to make educated decisions on, well, actually, the way that I consume and I purchase will ultimately affect the planet, whether it's negatively or positively. We need to teach people what's happening. We need to educate. We need to educate other people who aren't suffering with hunger. We also need to educate the people who are suffering with hunger in the countries where they're suffering is how can we rebuild the system or how can we improve the system around you that's going to provide food to you so that you don't pick up a gun and go to war to fight for someone who's going to give you bread. So, you know, I mean, this is happening in Syria, it's happening in Yemen, it's happening in Venezuela and all across the whole of the Sahel, northern Nigeria, all the way through to Ethiopia. You know, we've got countries that are picking up arms because they're fighting for people who are going to feed them, and that's the only reason why they're fighting. So we need to be able to rebuild communities around food. I think that we've got about 10 more years of really working hard to get the consumer to understand that they must connect to the producer and not be pushed around by companies that are just trying to make money from food. We need to be led by companies that are looking to heal the planet through better food systems. It's all connected to our localized food system now.
I have a big question for you, Arthur.
Uh-oh. Come on then. What is it?
Do you think we can solve global hunger?
Oh, Elizabeth.
And if so, what is it going to take?
It's going to take a massive effort from the planet to change the way that we interact with the climate. Also, it's going to take a massive effort on the peace front. So much of the issues around hunger are focused on war. You know, we have nations that have been at war for decades, you know, and we have some of the most volatile regions in the world destabilized because of human conflict. And therefore that generates hunger. You know, usually it's women and children who suffer. So hunger won't go away until we can actually have peace on this planet. And peace is a desperate thing to attain. It would take all of the human race to work collectively to become and understand why we shouldn't be fighting each other. And we need to be pulling it in all the same direction. But look, politics comes into it, positioning, whether it's tribal or whether it's financial, all of these things there's a push and a pull. it's going to take a massive effort. I know that zero hunger is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I've looked at it and I've listened to understanding what zero hunger means. It feels like a dream, but I do feel that with as much effort as we could give it, we could alleviate it, because it's not just about money, zero hunger. It's not. It's about politics, it's about people, it's about climate, it's about the future, and it's also about the past, and it's about history. So zero hunger is something that should be on everybody's lips, and it should be taught in schools, and it should be understood that, you know, zero hunger will not be attained until we can attain peace and a better human condition on this planet, because, you know, we're living as one entity now on the planet. The planet is getting smaller every day, you know, and we're living on it as a human race. So can we alleviate hunger on the planet by 2030? My honest answer is I don't think so. But my heart says that we must.
My name is Linda Gabriel, and I am of Malawian origins, but I was born and bred in Zimbabwe, and I've lived most of my life as a performance artist, highlighting the plight of women and a lot of activism work in different countries in Sub-Sahara.
Linda Gabriel took time off from her farming and poetry performances to reflect on who she is. She wants action in addition to words and is fighting hard for women smallholder farmers in my home country of Zimbabwe.
So what I'm hoping my work does is it cautions or draws masses back to mostly indigenous knowledge systems, to indigenous foods. A lot of our indigenous foods were much healthier than the cash crops that we've been consuming over the last years. So if masses could go back to eating well, to living in harmony, to healing the ecosystem, hence you find my work is all about organic. So I push for organic food, I push for nutrition, I push for indigenous knowledge into day-to-day lives, ways of conserving food, herbal remedies. What is it that we can do with what we have? Then one major thing that really disappoints me is in terms of food waste. We need to look at when we have excess, what do we do with excess besides, you know, a lot of markets just having tomatoes rotting. Oh my God, when I look at this, I'm like, oh my God, can't we dry tomatoes? Can't we have tomato powder before it goes to food waste? Believe you me, I've seen a lot of food waste go on. And I think it's also okay for people to understand that it's okay to just cook enough food of what you need than then getting to throw away leftover food like I've seen other families do. Food waste is a major part of how do we navigate these systems with saving, with also coming from a space of healing. How do we do more? How do we connect with the food? How do we connect with spaces? How do we heal broken soils, broken wounds? What do we do as a people in terms of moving forward and changing our lives? Oh my God, you know, since I got into food production, you know, I grew up with my grandmother and she was a hands-on woman. But, you know, when you're growing up and you're becoming a poet and you think you're a geek, you stop growing your own food. So later on, when I discovered permaculture, everything that happens around me is there's never a day that passes without thinking of my grandmother. I miss that woman. Because now, you see, when I started learning permaculture, it looked like a foreign concept. But I'm like, no, my grandma used to do that. No, my grandma used to do that. No. So what this has taught me to do is to simply visit a lot of old women and men who are still around, to just learn from them. Because then by the time my grandmother died, I was very young and I never thought I would follow her footsteps in growing food. So this poem really is just a reflection of where I am and how much my grandmother means to me, and how I'm humbled that I'm going to be pushing some of your knowledge forward. Because for us to move forward, we need to look back. What is it that was done and how is it we can do now? And what is it that they'll do in the future? And for me, I'm very humbled to use your knowledge to deal with climate change, to deal with healing the environment. So for me, it's also an honor that I get to talk about your name, remembering her and archiving some of your stories. So this poem is in memory of my grandmother who was called Marita.
On this new path, I stumbled on the essence of my grandmother. Now she makes it a thing to cross my mind very often. She who showed me my first steps in food production, or in practice, to hell with theory. Knowledge was transferred in that fashion. I was young, I followed through. Each harvest, grandma selected heavy ripened seeds, set them aside for the next one, smoked her maize cobs in the kitchen ceiling, dug pits in the ground, added wood ash, and stored her sweet potatoes for months. My grandmother is my earliest memory of the Three Sisters concept, ready to plant, cupped in one palm, maize, pumpkin, climbing bean seeds, dropped in one planting station. She knew the vital role played by each plant. Like I with my two sisters, very unique individuals, stacked in time, we complete my mother. Grandma must have spent her days watching and communicating with the land. To know particular farming techniques were required on different pieces of land. I can vividly see her planting maize on ridges. My grandmother and women before her were what we now call permaculture. They had their own ways of caring for the land. Today I choose to go back to them and see how I can influence the future of my daughters, granddaughters, and the great ones. Thank you.
Oh, it's just so heartwarming to hear how our gogos, our grandmothers, are such influences in our lives. I'm so happy you could join us on Better Food, Better World. My wish this week for Better Food, Better World is that we all think about what we eat, what we throw away, and what other people don't get to eat every day. What is your wish? Thank you so much for listening and helping us to work towards better food and a better world. We would love to hear from you. So please follow the conversation using the hashtag #BetterFoodBetterWorld. When we meet next, we hear from those tasked with fixing food systems.